It was reported on Thursday that the Chargers have interest in edge rusher Bud Dupree, and I absolutely love the way that general manager Joe Hortiz is trying to stack this roster with depth.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it's really nice to have a general manager that is not done adding depth after the draft. The Chargers brought in Bud Dupree for a visit, and I love everything about that. Who are some possible free agent corner options that the Chargers could add? And is it wild to assume that the Chargers will get over 8.5 wins this season?
A lot of great fan mail questions today and a lot of great stuff to get into, but definitely have to start with the Chargers trying to continue to build depth on this roster. And the great thing about building depth at this point is none of these moves count against their compensatory picks in 2025. So those are already locked in. Doesn't matter what the contracts are at this point, and they have some money to spend. One of the top teams in the NFL as far as cap space they still have available.
Crazy.
And Adam Schefter reported that free agent linebacker Bud Dupree concluded a visit with Los Angeles. Per source, Dupree has also been talking with the Falcons and Steelers, 2 of the 3 NFL teams for which he has played. And that part tells me kind of, okay, well, he already kind of knows what he has in those situations. And those situations might offer him more playing time potentially. So I think that's, Atlanta probably less so than the Steelers, who have TJ Watt and Highsmith there already. But it's interesting because he knows what he has there, and he's still showing interest in the Chargers as much as they're showing interest in him. But to me, David, the part that screams out about this, as far as just before we even get into what the player brings, is just adding to a position where you're already strong, right? This was such a issue when you had Tom Telesco. Like a couple years ago, Tom Telesco brings in Kyle Van Noy as the 3rd edge rusher, right? They draft Tuipulotu last year, and they don't bring Kyle Van Noy back pretty publicly. I mean, he seemed pretty upset about it, and they really could have used him because he played exceptionally well with the Ravens last year and with the Chargers before that. But when I see this, it's like when you already have potentially the best edge rusher trio in the league, which to me you absolutely have a chance to have with Khalil, Mack, Joey Bosa, and Tuipulotu. The fact that you're going out and still not being content with that and getting a dude who has started a ton of games in this league, like, I love that approach.
I love the process, Daniel. I just love the process of the fact that, you see who you have in that edge room, but also you understand that there's going to be attrition that takes place, right? Yeah. We know that Joey Bosa has dealt with injuries throughout his career. He's only had a couple of seasons where he's played 15-plus games. So adding somebody who has a lot of experience in this league and also has some pretty good production, I think is just a very good, sound business practice.
Yeah, and I mean, how many times, has the depth on this team absolutely just killed the Chargers? Like, how many years would you kill to have someone like a Joey Bosa go down and then have, Bud Dupree coming off the bench? That'd and, like, great. That's the thing is, like, if Bud Dupree was the Chargers, option for edge rusher 1 or edge rusher 2, I wouldn't like this move, right? But the fact that you want to do it to bring him in as your edge rusher 4, because he's not going to pass up Tuipulotu as kind of the key backup to the top 2 guys with what he did last year. He's already a better player than where Bud Dupree is at this point. But to have that guy be your 4th best edge rusher, I think is an insane move and something that it really should be lauded for this Chargers front office, because I just love the fact that they're not afraid to add to a position of strength. Just because we're good here already doesn't mean that we can't continue to add more good players there, which is exactly what Joe Hortiz said as soon as he took over. But as far as what he brings to the table, David, I mean, like I said, you're getting a dude who has started a ton of games, a dude who played 16 games last year, so that's nice. And you're having him as a key backup for this team. And I think, when you look at his production, I think it's pretty moderate. There's definitely some places he needs to improve for sure. But I think when you're looking at that as someone who's going to be a part-time player, hopefully, for this defense, I think there's a lot to like.
I mean, hey, first and foremost, this is a veteran who has 9 years of experience in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, that's definitely valuable. I mean, having a guy like that, another professional, another pro in that room to help bring along some of these other players, Also, had a year where he had 11.5 sacks. Back in 2019, that was his best year. 68 tackles, 11.5 sacks. That's premium production right there. Last year, pretty solid. 39 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 6.5 sacks. I think you'll definitely take that from your edge 4. That's quality production, and I definitely would feel like he would add, some really good depth to this room.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about just like consistency, right? At least 3 sacks in every season of his career, at least 5.5 sacks in 5 of his last 7 seasons, because that's what you're looking for. You're not necessarily looking for a double-digit sack number, nor do I think he would, get to that number, right, given what I believe his role will be. Even if there's an injury to a Joey Bosa, like he's still edge rusher 3, but like in years past, when you lost to Joey Bosa, like last year, it's Chris Rumph who's an edge 3 for you, which I think is a massive liability in years past. But slightly above average run defender according to Pro Football Focus. I think you like that. Ranked 48 out of 112 guys that had 100 run defense snaps last year. I think the biggest issue is the missed tackle rate. Like, has the potential to be a much better run defender and just has left a lot of production in the backfield. Missed 18.2% of his tackles last year, which ranked 102 out of 112 defenders with those 100 run defense snaps. So he was in the right place, but he wasn't finishing the play. So I think that's somewhere where, you could see a really big improvement by just making tackles, which is a lot easier said than done. Sure. But I'm sure something this, this coaching staff is going to be a huge emphasis, considering not just how bad the tackling has been for the Chargers, but considering how good of a tackling team that Michigan was last year. A lot of that is players, obviously, but a lot of that is the mentality and what they're teaching and how they're teaching it and the way they get that point across.
Well, a lot of swarm tackling, right? When you watch Michigan, you see just a ton of hats to the football. There's 5, 6, 7 guys. They're all rallying towards the football. That seems like something Jesse Minter would love to bring to the Chargers defense.
Of course. But as far as just the pass rush production, as far as the just raw numbers, hasn't been an above average pass rusher in a few seasons for Bud Dupree. And I think what you're hoping for here is in a more limited role that you can get better out of him in those limited snaps when you're not needing him to go be a starter for you and play an entire game. So I think with those limited snaps, I think you could expect that he could be better as far as just more efficient with his pass rushing, because he was getting those sack numbers, and not huge sack numbers, with a ton of pass rushing snaps, right? Yeah. That's why it's hard to believe he's going to hit some of those numbers, because he's just not going to get that much opportunity. You don't expect him to. But if the Chargers do make this move, to me, that puts Chris Rumph's roster spot in major jeopardy, like huge, huge jeopardy. Bud Dupree's worst season, and he's had bad seasons, is better than Chris Rumph's best season. So, to me, if they make this move, it puts Chris Rumph on the outside looking in, unless the Chargers are planning on keeping 5 edge defenders.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at Chris Rumph, this is the guy that has 3 sacks in 3 seasons. That's just what it is. He hasn't played a ton of snaps on defense. He's played most of his snaps on special teams. He's been a guy that's been all over the special teams unit, but he just hasn't earned those snaps to be on defense. He also had some issues with, gaining some strength, adding some weight, being a little bit better on the edge, being a little bit better of a tackler. He always had that bend, and he was able to get around the corner, but there were some obvious deficiencies in his game. When he played last year, he only played 6 games, and that's because he fractured his foot in warm-ups, before the Detroit Lions game, and then he missed the rest of the season. So, coming off an injury, also not having the best production. If this move gets made, then yes, his feet are very firmly being held to the fire.
Yeah, and to me, it's more than that. It's like, hey, if he wins the job, great. It means he's made major improvements there. But at this point, he's shown some pass rush ability and bursts, in spurts, you could say. But he just has not shown that he can set the edge at the NFL level. Yeah, and if you are just a total liability in run defense, it's hard to get him in there in pass rushing situations when you already have 3 guys ahead of him who are even better than him at rushing the passer. So nothing has shown me that Chris Rumph is ready for a bigger role. Physically, I just don't know if he's an NFL edge defender, and he had those questions coming out, and he just hasn't been able to answer them. So that's what I love, though, is that the fact that the Chargers aren't going to sit on their hands and have undrafted free agents try to go for Chris Rumph's job. Bring someone who's done it, bring a former starter, bring a veteran to push him for that 4th spot and potentially take that job. I think that's a great move by the Chargers. But what about the cornerback position? Because that's somewhere that they could definitely add to, and we're going to talk about some guys they could potentially go after now that the draft is over, coming up right after this and much more. I do need to tell you guys, though, that today's episode is sponsored by Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you in financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. And they're the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts with a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and that's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you in your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. I also need to tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what you need to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, David, what is Fan Mail Friday? And we have a lot of great fan questions to get to. So thank you to everyone who hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter and everyone who called in the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. But let's start here, David, with another free agency question, because the Chargers have obviously been very active, at least in showing some interest, bringing in DJ Chark after the draft. But they're not content with where this roster's at. They saw what they got in the draft, and they're continuing to try to address it and make this team as deep as possible. And we have a question here from Micah Guerrero, who asks, of the cornerbacks available on the market, who would you like to see the Chargers bring in? And David, there's still some pretty big names in the cornerback market. Maybe we'll see more movement once one of these bigger guys at the top gets moved or signed somewhere, but there's a lot of names to like out there.
Yeah, one of the names that is the chief among them, for me, is former Chief cornerback Steven Nelson. Spent the last 2 years with Houston, has played 32 of a possible 34 games. His worst game last year was against New Orleans, where he gave up 5 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown, but also had an interception in that same game. And he had 4 interceptions last season. And he's only allowed 2 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons combined. I think this is a guy that has a ton of experience playing on the outside and has played a lot of quality football the last couple of years.
Yeah, also has, experience in the inside too, albeit quite a while ago. I think you would want him as an outside corner. I think that's the interesting spot the Chargers are in, just because they could really use somebody at either position. I mean, if you brought in a cornerback, pretty much no matter where they play, you could make an argument you have a need there. Because at the slot position, you have either, Jasir Taylor, potentially Tari Steele, maybe the undrafted free agents fighting it out for that starting slot role. And on the outside, you have Christian Fulton, who's bad last year, Asante Samuel Jr., who has question marks about his game, and then Cam Hart, who's a 5th-round pick, and then Dean Leonard, obviously a former 7th-round pick. We'll see how they feel about him. But anywhere you look, you could kind of add it and make an argument for it. It's interesting that we haven't seen the Chargers actually be reported to have interest, but the big names out there, Xavier Howard, Adoree Jackson, Stephon Gilmore, Steven Nelson. Obviously, Stephon Gilmore is still playing great at his age. If you want a veteran and you're not worried about his age, he would probably fit great with the Chargers. I like Adoree Jackson a lot as a backup, bounce back candidate, I would say. A ton of athleticism.
Ton of speed.
Not super old. Has some production, and is coming off a much worse year in 2023 than he had in 2022. So if you're looking for bounce backs, I think that's good. I mean, Steven Nelson was a guy that we were interested in before the draft, right? When we were just heading into free agency, that was someone that's hey, probably isn't going to cost what it is at the top of the market, still playing at an extremely high level. I think an under-the-radar option, Akello Witherspoon, who was with the Rams last year, 3 interceptions with them, had a nice bounce-back year. He still finds himself on the market. But if the Chargers want to go find more veterans, they're out there.
Yeah.
And I think if they don't, it tells you how good they feel about Christian Fulton having a better year, how they feel about Asante Samuel Jr. on the outside. I think there's still questions there. I'd like to see another veteran in that room. But let's get to this next one here from Catan Quincy, who's asking, what's your prediction of the final offensive line starters going into the season? Who plays where? So we're not going to make our final predictions right now because we just have too many questions about this group and we have to see it play out a little bit. I mean, we are in May right now, but I'm happy to talk about where I think it is at this moment because, David, one thing that we did see over the last couple of days was the Chargers put a video out and Jamari Sawyer was playing right tackle and Trey Pipkins was playing right guard, which is obviously the opposite of where they were last season. We heard Jim Harbaugh say that he thinks that Trey Pipkins is one of the top 5 offensive linemen on this team. And also Joe Alt wasn't out there. So that's the other interesting thing. So you don't know where he would have been had he been out there. But very interesting to see that, okay, they're going Trey Pipkins right out of the gate. Hey, you're playing guard. Jamari Sawyer, you're playing tackle. And that was interesting.
Started early, right? I mean, if you're going to make that transition, start it as early as humanly possible. But my starting 5 offensive linemen are as follows. Left tackle, easy, Rashawn Slater. Don't have to think about that one very much. Left guard, it's going to be Zion Johnson. You're going to have Bradley Bozeman in the middle at center. You're going to have Trey Pipkins at right guard. And then at right tackle, it's going to be your first round pick, Joe Alt.
And I think if you had to pick right now, I think that's kind of what it has to be, right? Like they're showing you that they think that Trey Pipkins is a guard and they're going to fully try him at guard. The interesting thing is, though, is it's like, okay, well, are you going to have Jamari Sawyer also playing guard in training camp? Like, is there competition between those two? Or are you just committed to Jamari Sawyer, just get as good as at tackle as you can? Because the thing is, we don't know if Trey Pipkins is going to be good there. You know what I mean? Like, we know Trey Pipkins would be a really good swing tackle at this point in his career. He'd be
really expensive one too.
A very expensive one, but where he's played all of his career and also knowing that he was kind of scapegoated last year, a really good option to have as your third best tackle. Inside is a bigger question. So if Trey Pipkins is an obvious upgrade over Jamari Sawyer, I love it, but we have to see it a little bit. So if you had to go with what we think now, that's what I would go with as well. But, man, we still have to see what Trey Pipkins looks like as guard because I think just assuming without a veteran there to actually push him that's played that position outside of Jamari Sawyer, I still think that's a pretty big risk. And I do hope that if it's not working out, the Chargers do look to free agency to potentially bring someone in there to try to compete for that spot with Trey Pipkins or Jamari Sawyer, whoever's there still. Because Trey Pipkins' worst-case scenario is a very good swing tackle. It is interesting, though, that they think that Jamari Sawyer, maybe his best spot is actually at tackle. But let's get to this last one here from Chris Saiz, who asks, what storyline interests you more, the guys making the roster or the roster cuts? David, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm always a guy that's going to lean on the side of optimism. It's just in my nature. So for me, I want to see who's going to make the team. I want to see who's going to come alive in the offseason here in training camp, who's going to be able to just work their tail off to be able to earn their spot. Which one of these wide receivers is going to get picked? Which one of these wide receivers is going to make the team? Are both of the 7th round wide receivers going to make the team? I think that's far from a lock at this point in time. And hey, can somebody in that safety room from maybe one of these undrafted free agents, can they steal, one of those spots at that position? I think those are a couple of positions I'm definitely going to be looking at to see who's able to earn their spot on this 53-man roster.
Yeah, I totally understand that. In a lot of ways, it's the same, right? Who is not making it has as much of an impact as who's making it. But, of course, I'm going to go with the exact opposite. I think, to me, what's much more interesting is the guys who get cut because I think what it is going to be potentially is a full-blown exodus of players that were drafted by the Chargers in years past. And that, to me, is so interesting because, truthfully, Chargers didn't usually cut their draft picks.
That's true.
There's a few guys that would get cut here and there, but they would give those guys a chance to play their 4 years out and leave or do whatever. Now you're looking at Chris Rumph, who we talked about, JT Woods, Isaiah Spiller, or Brendan Hymas, all guys that were drafted by this previous regime, that there's a great chance those guys aren't on the roster.
Yeah,
truly, there is. I mean, there's 3 running backs in front of Isaiah Spiller. JT Woods, it doesn't feel like he's a fit, and he would have to make a huge leap for him to really have a pivotal spot on this defense, a crucial spot on this defense. Isaiah Spiller talked about Chris Rumph. If you're adding an edge rusher, that puts him on the outside looking in. It's crazy to say that Brendan Hymas as the backup center might actually have the best chance, right? It's him or Jordan McFadden. Maybe Jordan McFadden's on the bubble as a former 6th-round pick. It feels like everything is on the table, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see who gets cut because it's just this, Jim Harbaugh-led team showing you what they value, which could be very different. And we've already seen it be much different than what Tom Telesco valued in the past, right? As far as letting guys go. So like we could see 4, 5, more than that former Chargers draft picks get left on the cutting room floor when this 53-man roster actually happens. So it's like, that's going to be crazy to me to see how many of those guys can still make this team when a new standard is being set, when new parts of your game are being valued. So that to me is very, very interesting. And also, the same vein as you, like one of Brendan Rice or Cornelius Johnson is going to get cut. Which one of those guys is it going to be? So kind of the same way in that, but seeing those former Chargers draft picks who haven't panned out potentially off the roster, I think is very, very interesting. But we still have more to get into, including the Chargers win total being at 8.5. We've talked about it a little bit. Should it scare us? Does Vegas know? Does FanDuel know something that we don't? Because they're not often wrong. Why is the number at 8.5 right now? Should that scare us away from it? We're going to get into that. And also, how many primetime games will the Chargers get with the schedule release coming out next week? And more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys that today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week, but I really doubt it because I'm going to go with a curveball this week. I know I've talked about a lot of sports heartbreak, and they have caused me a lot of therapy, the Chargers have. But today, I'm just talking about having a baby is hard, man. Like, they don't really tell you how hard it is to have a newborn child and try to juggle 2 jobs. And also having to tell grandparents no, everyone, that everyone wants to see you all the time. And thank God that I've gone to therapy because, like, having those tools, being willing to tell someone no, hey, I need some me time. I can't do it right now. Like, and not having to feel bad about it is something that I'm so glad that I have now, because if I just didn't have those tools, it would just make it so much worse. But being able to kind of reason with myself and understand not everything's going to be perfect, understand things are going to be hard, and that's okay, and I'm going to get frustrated, and that's okay, are all such important lessons that I've learned through therapy. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Just visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, David, we have some more fan mail questions to get into, including about FanDuel's projection of the Chargers win total at 8.5. It's a number that I think we both think that they will exceed, but I do want to tell everyone to make sure they're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel where you get national sports covered on that scale by local experts who are covering those teams every single day and just know those teams inside and out. So make sure you guys go subscribe to Locked On Sports Today in that 24/7 live streaming channel. David, we have a good question here from Nicholas Petrelli, and something I've seen going around a lot with FanDuel releasing what their odds are for the Chargers win total in 2024. And I mean, to be honest, FanDuel is really the only one that counts, the only one that's really important around these parts. This is what the question is. Does the 8.5 win over under total scare you at all? A weak schedule and better coach and Herbert at QB, that's a crazy number to me. Besides last season when Herbert got hurt, Staley's worst year was 9 wins, and he was the worst coach of all time. Hot take, I don't think Brand Staley was the worst coach of all time, but I understand the feeling there. So FanDuel does currently have the Chargers win total at 8.5 wins. To me, David, I'm not scared. It doesn't scare me that that's what the number is. I think with so many unknowns, with such a huge roster turnover, I think all those things are playing into it. Also, the fact that Justin Herbert has had pretty severe injuries in 2 of his last 2 seasons. So I'm not freaking out about it. I still think, to me, I'm not going to bet on Jim Harbaugh having a losing season, his first losing season as any year he's ever had in the NFL.
It's definitely about the unknowns, Daniel. I mean, this is another new system with new skill players. It's a new defensive coordinator with a new scheme. It's a new general manager and a head coach who's unequivocally great, but hasn't coached in the NFL in almost a decade, right? I mean, These are all facts. But I honestly see all of these moves as overwhelmingly positive, and most of the reasons why I'm smashing the over. I absolutely expect them to win more than 8.5 games. I think that, to me, is slam dunk, take it to the bank.
I get what you're saying. I would disagree with you in saying all of those things were benefits. I'm not going to sit here and say losing Keenan Allen was a benefit. I think they would be much better this year with Keenan Allen, and even with what they did and understanding it. Keenan Allen's a better wide receiver. times 2 than anyone that they have right now, current production-wise. So I'm not going to say that. Losing Mike Williams is a big deal. Losing Austin Eckler, even though last year's version of him, it feels less bad. It's a lot of new guys and a lot of new roles. I think the nice thing is you have a lot of guys who have played in this system before and the veterans that you've been able to bring in. And to me, it comes down to this. Like last year, they won 5 games with Herbert missing 5 games, right? And having another broken finger in the rest of the games, or a lot of the rest of the games, right? And also had Brandon Staley. So if you're telling me a healthy Justin Herbert plus Jim Harbaugh, that's worth more than 4 wins to me, right? I think the Chargers, even last year, at least probably get 2 more wins and get to 7 with Justin Herbert if he stays healthy. So you're talking about that team. And the other thing is about the guys they've lost. A lot of them weren't available. Like Mike Williams missed 18 games over the last couple of years, right? Keenan Allen missed games. Austin Eckler didn't look the same. Gerald Everett, obviously, you're going to miss him for sure. He was an underrated player. But I do think that them surpassing 8.5 wins would be more likely than not. I would definitely hit the over on that. But we do have a good question here from Matthew, called into the voicemail line. Let's hear what he's got for us this week.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Matthew. So we know next week is the schedule release. Just curious, how many primetime games do you expect we're going to have next week? And let me know what you guys think about that. Have a good day. Thank you, guys. Both up.
This is an interesting question, David, for a couple of different reasons. But if you had to guess, how many do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, so I think the Harbaugh effect is real. I mean, obviously bringing him back to the NFL, he's going to warrant a couple of primetime games along with Justin Herbert. He's still a superstar in this league, and they are still going to want to showcase their superstars. So right now, I think I have it at 5. I think 5 primetime games. The Harbaugh, obviously going against his brother, the Ravens.
It would be wild if that game's not primetime.
It's definitely going to be a primetime game. Yeah, there's no question. Kansas City, I think, is going to be another primetime game. I think Cincinnati has a good chance to be a primetime game. And then maybe one of the Raiders, the Steelers, or the Titans. I think all of those could potentially be primetime games as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans is just because the leak happened. It said they're going to be playing the Titans. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the Titans would bring as far as like a storyline, as far as a good team, or anything like that. But I did see there was a supposed schedule leak that the Chargers are playing the Titans on Thanksgiving. I would put a huge grain of salt with that until we see what happens. I mean, they're going to get probably a random primetime game just because every team's going to get a primetime game at some point. So you're going to, these teams have to play somebody. I think the interesting thing is, because don't forget, they had 6 last year out the gate. They lost one of them, but they had 6 scheduled last year, which is crazy. And kind of shows you that everyone else was kind of buying into the hype as much as Chargers fans were with Brandon Staley last year and the pieces they had going. I think it'll be less this year. 5 wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, it's hard to see them getting 6, but the big reason is just because their schedule. Like, their schedule just doesn't have a ton of exciting teams. Like, there's a reason they have one of the easiest schedules in the league is because they have so many teams that were so poor last year. So I think that a lot of that is going to be a big reason and a big factor in how many primetime games they get. Steelers-Chargers is always a banger. Bengals-Chargers should be a great game. The Ravens for sure. One of the Chiefs games, one of the Raiders games. I mean, you could see it happening, but it'll be interesting. They'll tell you exactly how much they want to put Jim Harbaugh out there with how many they give them. So it'll be great to see next Thursday, and make sure you're back here that night because we will be doing a live show after the Chargers schedule release. But let's get to it here real quick here before we get out, asking if we really want to see the Chiefs in week 1.
David, my baby, this is it to you. I know you love me. This is my question. Everybody is asking for the Chargers to play the Chiefs in week 1. You know the outcome. You know you have to deal with the refs. You know you have to deal with this team. Why? Why in week 1? Why? Can you please save me? Please. I know you love me. I hope you agree with me. Why? Thank you, my baby. I love you.
I got to be quick, David. What do you think?
3 reasons. 1, I want all the smoke, number 1. Number 2, the Chargers will be as healthy as they will be all season. And number 3, they will have the element of surprise, a new offense, and a new defense.
Yeah, I get all those things. I mean, it wouldn't bother me if the Chargers played the Chiefs week 1. I think it's a great barometer just to see exactly how far you've come, right? You can't ask for a better test than that in week 1. Then again, I mean, if we're being honest, I'd like to let them at least kind of build up into it if that's going to be, like, if it is later on in the season, how quickly you're going to be able to get things to click, right? And we don't know how much they're playing in the preseason. We don't know who's even starting or anything yet right now. So I think it's just how quickly can you find that identity? How quickly can you get things offensively to click? Because a lot of times, look, even in the first 4 games of last season, like sometimes it takes a little bit. It was very inconsistent for the Chargers early on and for most of the season, but like it might not happen for the Chargers right away. So if they go and lose to the Chiefs in week 1, probably a ton of overreaction. Probably, Jim Harbaugh not as good as we thought or whatever. Like there's always going to be overreactions. I'm okay. I'm actually on your side here. I'm okay with getting them a couple of games into the season. Let them build into it. Let them find themselves. Let them find that identity on defense. Let them figure out what they have on this team when things and the bullets are live, right? Because that is a huge test for you coming out of the gate in week 1. I'm still okay with it. It would be awesome if they could pull off the win week 1, but I'm not afraid either to, take the Broncos in week 1 and then build into having to play the reigning 2-time Super Bowl champs. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here on Monday with the latest Chargers news, maybe another undrafted free agent Monday. If you guys want us to do UDFA Monday again, let us know in the YouTube comments or in an Apple Podcast review if you want to. But to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find it on me and David's personal Twitter accounts, me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD. Thank you to Atir and Matthew for calling into the voicemail line. If you want to do that, call into 323-524-7924. Leave a 30-second voicemail Chargers question, and you're likely to get on the show. We can't use over a minute ones. We can't use 2-minute long ones. We got in trouble for it because that's what we used to do. But make sure you guys are back here on Monday for the latest and greatest because it is your team every day. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.